felt like a failure. Maybe you felt like that. Maybe you're going and talking. Kind of feels good when you're in there, but you just feel like you're getting nowhere. If that is you need to start to use some somatic healing techniques in the work so that you can actually start to feel better, because trauma isn't a life sentence. It doesn't mean just because you feel like this right now, that is it forever. But just talking doesn't necessarily really heal at that root cause. We have to work at that nervous system level. Validation and witnessing your experience of narcissistic abuse is a really important part of your healing journey. And this is exactly what I'm going to be talking about, because I need your help, everybody, on today's episode on my Trauma and Narcissism Redefined podcast. Hi everybody, my name is Caroline Strawson. I'm the founder of the Mental Wellbeing Company, and I specialise in helping you heal after trauma and narcissistic abuse, because I have been exactly where you are. Now, I'm actually after some advice really on this particular episode, because I've had an idea, and rather than just bring it out to you all who listen to my podcast, and firstly, thank you. If you're new, massive welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because we have such an amazing community that I kind of feel like, rather than me just jumping ahead and doing this, I'd really like to get your advice. So really this podcast episode is, yes, I'm going to give you some education and something to take away, but I also want to ask your advice on a series that I've been thinking of doing in my podcast, and I'd really love your feedback. So I did a couple of interviews recently, a couple with some celebrities and some others, around their experiences of narcissistic abuse. And what I realized was the value in literally sitting there and them having fire questions at me about their experience. Well, what is it if they do this? What is it if they do that? And me responding to all of that. And it ended up with a couple of them almost like a mini masterclass of them asking me lots of questions, me helping them validate their experience, me doing a mini therapy session with them, and then giving them something to work on as they came away. But all the time I was doing these interviews, and they were actually interviewing me for me being on their podcast, I kept thinking at the back of my mind, this would be gold for my audience to listen to. So it got me thinking about maybe doing a series of what I would like to call survivor stories. And that could be maybe some celebrities if they're willing to share their survivor stories of trauma and narcissistic abuse. But that also could be you. Now, that doesn't mean you would necessarily be on camera and visible and also have your name there, because again, sometimes for legal reasons, sometimes for protection and safety reasons, that won't be applicable. But I know this was a while ago, probably about 3 years ago actually, in my free Facebook community group, Narcissistic Abuse and Trauma Recovery for Women. And again, I'll pop the link in the show notes for you. If you're not a member of that, it's totally free. Do come along and join us there. And I remember doing a series, I think it was over a few Sunday nights, where I called it Survivor Stories. And I literally, in the safe constraints of our Facebook group, because it's private, I interviewed I think it must have been about 5 or 6 community members that were experiencing different levels of narcissistic abuse, from financial to religious to all these different elements, psychological, emotional. The nuances that came up, and everybody was different. They were all at different stages of their journey. Some were still in the relationship. Some had come out of the relationship. Some were still being dragged through the courts years later as well. But what I realized when I did these survivor stories was that people really like to listen to them. Even if that particular story was slightly different to what someone else was experiencing, people could always take something from that. And what I didn't do on these was kind of like a mini therapy session necessarily. It was more like an interview and a talking about it. But it got me thinking, do you know what? I would love to interview you guys, some of you, and really get you to share your stories and to actually ask me questions about things. You know, why did they do this? Why would someone do that? And really so we can use it as a teaching opportunity as well for others to learn about narcissism. And remember, I don't diagnose narcissistic personality disorder. I don't believe in a diagnosis and the medicalization. We look at narcissistic traits, how you feel, And we really start to look at the abusive elements of those too, because, just because we medicalize something doesn't mean we're excusing someone's behavior. And we mustn't do that with a narcissist, because abuse is still abuse. And narcissist is such a key word for us as survivors to be able to use. And I know it gets so many times the eyebrows are raising, not that word narcissist again. You can't say that. They don't have a diagnosis, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I don't want to speak to people like that. Thank you very much. Because if you're not prepared to listen to survivors of genuine narcissistic abuse, which is domestic abuse, which is trauma, then there is a problem. If you can't be compassionate and kind to somebody, that word is so important to us as survivors to know it's not our fault, they will not change, and we need to focus on our healing. So the word narcissist is so important, and I'm certainly not going to ever stop talking about it or saying it either. So one of the things that I'm thinking of doing is a whole series on survivor stories, interviewing people like yourself, and even in person. So I will be able to have access to studios in London where I will be able to have people to come in and we can interview. We'd probably interview back of your head to keep you safe as well. It would be anonymous, but it would be an opportunity for you to share your story, to ask me any questions, and for me to do a mini somatic therapy session there too. Because I think that's really important, because for many of us who've been stuck in narcissistic relationships, we go and have talk in therapy and counseling. And that's good, and you feel witness. But to truly heal and thrive from narcissistic abuse, and this is what I bang on all the time about, this is why I created the Mental Wellbeing Company, to change, systemic change around what we think of a society really helps us heal from trauma. Because yes, it's good to talk, absolutely, but you've got to feel to heal. So I was thinking if I did some survivor stories as well, that maybe with the survivor stories and we're interviewing, I can do some mini therapy sessions utilizing things like somatic experiencing, maybe EMDR, breath work, internal family systems, which is a parts therapeutic model, just so that you could all listen or even come and watch over on YouTube these types of sessions. Because I really believe, and I look back and I think, if I'd have been able to watch or listen to something like this and know that it's not just me, someone else is going through that. Not that you ever want anyone else to go through it, right? But if someone else is going through all of that, maybe, just maybe, I would be able to help and support somebody else, and to know that I am not the crazy one. This does happen to other people, maybe in different ways and different complexities and different nuances, but ultimately it is all the same. It's the narcissist abusing an individual, and they will use various tools with that. So I'd be interviewing people maybe who are going through courts, maybe financial abuse, parenting challenges, maybe they're still in the relationship. Maybe you know of a celebrity that would love to maybe come on the survivor stories. We've had over nearly 5.5 million downloads now. So we have a little bit of kudos there that maybe we could get somebody to come on and we can interview. Because I also know sometimes people think, I don't want to watch celebrities because they're celebrities. It's not real. You know what? Sometimes it actually shows it can happen to anybody. And I certainly know, because I get messages from celebrities. So celebrities who are in a narcissistic relationship with a non-celebrity, but because the public perceive them in a certain way, they feel stuck and they can't say anything. Equally, I get a lot of messages from people who are in a relationship that is the celebrity that is a narcissist, and they're really, really worried about speaking out too. So there's layers to all of this, and I thought it'd be really interesting, really informative and educational, and hopefully inspirational to many of you if we're seeing the other side of some of these things, about how you can start to heal and thrive after narcissistic abuse. So really, I want to know, and you need to either email me at hello@carolinestrawson.com or drop me a message on Instagram. Go and follow me, Caroline Strawson, and let me know, is this a good idea? Would you want to come and be on, have me interview on survivor stories? Can you get to my studios in London where we could maybe interview you? So I'm kind of feeling like maybe in the new year, I will do a whole series of survivor stories. And the ethos will predominantly be around narcissistic abuse, but we will bring some other trauma elements in, because many people that I speak to who've experienced narcissistic abuse, there's normally other trauma there in the background too. And sometimes that waters down what we think is the narcissistic abuse because we know we've experienced something else. So let me know, drop me an email. send me a message over on Instagram. And just really going back to the talking piece around healing. And it's something I feel so passionate about because I felt so stupid because here in the UK, for instance, you know, if you're experiencing, say, mental health issues, they'll maybe give you 6 free counselling sessions. And you have to wait ages to get them, but you do get them in the end. Maybe if you're lucky, you might get something where you can go and see somebody else, an actual therapist, but you normally have to wait a long period of time. So I saw a therapist privately and I saw a counsellor, but I only went twice because I felt really angry after the second time. And what I realised was that talking wasn't working for me, trying to heal from my trauma. I was actually starting to feel worse because I was saying to myself, surely if I'm seeing people, I should start to feel better. But I was actually starting to feel worse, which made me feel even more like a failure than I was at the start of all of this. So actually talking about my trauma and trying to work with people made me feel worse in the long run. And then that was only when I realized that you have to work from the nervous system up that I thought, why do we not know this stuff? Why did I only think that talking was the actual way to go and help people with any mental health issues, trauma, and healing from narcissistic abuse? Surely I'm not the only one who thinks that. And obviously I know I'm not the only one that thinks that because it opened up a whole new world for me. And I literally felt so strongly about this. I used to be a podiatrist, for those of you that don't know. I completely retrained. So I'm now trained in things like somatic experiencing, and this is a really key 3-year trauma training, probably the best trained trauma therapists in the world. EMDR, brain spotting, breathwork, positive psychology, you know, I've got a postgrad, EMDR, you know, lots of these types of therapies that are what we call bottom-up based, somatic based. We're working with the nervous system upward, not just the mind, the brain downwards. It's important for someone to listen to you, to hold space for you. But there comes this tipping point where if you keep talking about it, you're actually wiring in that trauma even more, and we're going to stay even more triggered because it becomes our reality in feeling like that too. So this is why I'm super passionate about somatic work and why talking helps, but you've got to feel to heal. You really must work at that nervous system level. And that's at the heart of every single thing that I do with one-to-ones, with group programs, my masterminds, my coaching certifications that I teach, my franchise that I have. Everything is about systemic change. You know, talking is good. And lots of people like psychologists, psychotherapists, beautifully well trained in things like attachment and can be really, really super helpful in helping you feel safe in at least some relationship to go out there and maybe have some form of healing. But to really, really heal so we don't feel those triggers as much, we start to be able to process our emotions, maybe not cry at every drop of the hat or get angry or feel so dissociated, which was in last week's podcast, where we feel totally disconnected. You know, we've really got to work on those somatic therapies. And that's exactly what I do, because I didn't know this. I felt like a failure. Maybe you felt like that. Maybe you're going and talking. It kind of feels good when you're in there, but you just feel like you're getting nowhere. If that is you, you need to start to use some somatic healing techniques in the work so that you can actually start to feel better. Because trauma isn't a life sentence. It doesn't mean just because you feel like this right now, that is it forever. But just talking doesn't necessarily really heal at that root cause. We have to work at that nervous system level. And why we're not taught this in schools, I will never know. That is why, again, as part of my mental wellbeing company, that's what we're doing. We're getting it out into schools and workplaces, as well as working with people on a one-to-one basis. So 2 things you need to think about after listening to today's episode. 1, survivor stories. Good idea? Would you ever be interviewed on that? You wouldn't be seen. It would be anonymous, remember, from a legal and safety standpoint. And then the other is, were you like me? Are you trying all the traditional things that are meant to be working, but feeling really stuck? Maybe you can relate to that. Well, I hope you know that is not your fault. It's just what you are doing. It needs something extra. It needs some more somatic work with that too. So I hope that was interesting for you. I need your help, need your advice. Please, please, please let me know via email or on Instagram. We are an amazing community. Make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you hit that bell, you hit the subscribe. If you're listening to this on any of the podcast platforms, make sure you hit that follow and subscribe so you don't miss. Remember, these drop every single Tuesday. Without fail, you will get an episode where I will try and help you heal and thrive after trauma, after narcissistic abuse, because of my own experiences. You know, I'm not a doctor, but I am trained in what I do, and I take very seriously what I do. So take care, my friends. Have an amazing week. Remember, look after yourself. Remember, trauma does not have to be a life sentence. And there is life, let me tell you, after narcissistic abuse. Take care, my friends.